Hi, Willo Boniface here, and this is another episode of Inside Research Strategy. And today I'm joined by Phil Doyle, one of our principal consultants here at Research Strategies Australia.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks, Willo.
No problem. So today we're going to be talking about AI in universities, and there's a lot of dialogue happening, and there's a lot of chatter around how it impacts teaching and research. And as an ex-professional staff at a university, I can see a lot of potential there. What's your take on how this can enable professional staff?
Yeah, I think it could be incredibly powerful and useful to support professional staff in their roles and enable them to do, I suppose, do more work that's impactful rather than being caught up on some of the work that can be distracting in a university for professional staff. It's actually hard to say how it's going to have an impact in one respect, because so much of the impact is decided at the local level, in the sense that it's the staff member who knows their job well, knows their role in the university, the impact that they're trying to have, and some of the constraints they're operating in and the realities of their operating environment and all that sort of stuff. The AI tool is adaptable and can be used in all sorts of ways. So in a sense, it's one of those technologies where the innovation happens at quite a human level, at that individual level. So I think the impact could be incredibly varied and quite exciting, though it does need to happen in an environment that enables that experimentation to happen, as opposed to a top-down technology deployment approach, which might happen with Workday or SAP or something like that. That's a different type of technology in that sense. But I think that's great potential.
And I guess thinking about being on the ground in a university and knowing those processes and where the bottlenecks are, I guess professional staff are very well placed to identify how they can enable their own work and affect change. And often, I guess there's a perception professional staff perhaps don't show as much rigor or thinking in their work. That is certainly not my experience. In fact, a lot of the people within a research office, for example, are PhDs. They're highly intelligent people who have been, in other professional roles of high impact. And it's a shame that they don't get the same, acknowledgement, I guess, in the university environment. But if we were to think about, let's take a research services office, how do you see AI enabling, or what does an AI-enabled research office look like?
I mean, I can come up with what I think it looks like, but I also go back to that earlier point regarding that local level innovation. But I think it could be incredibly helpful with monitoring emails and correspondence. It could be useful in supporting grant writing, grant analysis, grant opportunity analysis and triage. And these are all areas that I've seen firsthand the impact that AI can have, but also the limitations. As someone who has a lot of experience in the grant space, it can be like having a team that's working for you to help you prepare the information that needs to be prepared. But it needs to be managed closely and carefully, and to be blunt, the output's not at a point where you would ever submit, well, I don't think it's at the point where you would submit an application straight out of an AI tool, even the state-of-the-art frontier models. But the ability to speed up the drafting and to spend more time thinking about what the proposition is and what the opportunity is and how it should be framed and how to support the people that are trying to apply. That's one of the things I like. So if I think about an RSO office, I think there's a whole lot of stuff that I honestly can't answer that question. I think it will depend on the individuals that are doing the work and the specific environment they find themselves in. But as someone that does have that grants experience, I can say it's incredibly powerful, but it's still, I can still feel myself using that 20 years of experience a lot in trying to get the right outcome. It's not right straight away. It doesn't draft the right sorts of responses immediately, even with well-developed skills in, the skills being those instructions that are used again and again inside Claude or ChatGPT and other platforms that enable you to get a much more consistent type of output. Yeah, it's even with those being incredibly well calibrated, I still find it's not there, but it's still incredibly helpful, and it takes a huge burden off some of the what I call operational or busy work that comes with grants. So for an RSO, I think about the classic RSO or whatever it's called in the institution that's swamped with correspondence from academics and others in the university, has significant reporting requirements that need to be supported. And I wouldn't suggest that AI would take those on, as in you're not going to want to automate the reporting process or automate that, but the ability perhaps to provide reports on a daily basis regarding the emails that have been received in a functional mailbox, for instance. It would be useful transparency for a manager to be able to see that, and perhaps the staff as well. But it doesn't change the fact that someone needs to get in the inbox and actually then process every single one of those emails and perhaps triage. They may triage them differently to the way the AI does, but the ability to sort and process information and then support those processes, I think, could be incredibly powerful in an RSO. But I don't see a lot of evidence that that there are many universities out there that are giving their staff, particularly their professional staff, the space to experiment in ways that would enable them to get the best outcomes from the tools.
Yeah, and I think, on the ground, there was access to Copilot in a lot of instances. That's what I'm seeing from my past experience, and as well as what we're seeing when we're consulting across the sector. And so I guess there's an argument to say, if we're going to embrace AI, what model do we embrace and things like that. But beyond what model, because it's kind of irrelevant, right? We're talking about a workforce that just looks different, right? And I think there's always this question that I grapple with when it comes to AI, and it comes back to what value does the human intervention,
Yeah.
like what value do we add? And I think about that in terms of a research project, for example. The value add is the idea. And the value add then, I guess, that AI can enable is conveying that idea in a way that is compelling, that might be compelling for a funder or a partner or something beyond, their little sphere of influence, so that they can create impact by their idea and their research. Sometimes I think maybe there's a lot of fear, is what I'm feeling, that some of these things that make an academic, grounded in their knowledge and their expertise over many years of work, that the knowledge is no longer the currency, and it's about how we tell stories, perhaps, and sort of thinking about where the humans come into it to add the value. And maybe it's always been that way, but when AI can strip back some of that admin, that busy work, and go, actually, then what do we do? How do we step forward here? Do you have any thoughts on, I guess, where we should be, AI should enable, and where, we should absolutely not, and we should own that part of it, and that for an academic?
It's interesting for an academic. I think it's up to the members of the community to decide what the standards are there. But I think there's a bunch of stuff that AI can do or is likely to be able to do in the future, and that could be amazing and incredible and empowering for academics and enable them to do a whole lot of stuff that they can't do today because they're bogged down. And there's some great examples of this. I think of his name. I think he's a US academic. Writes under the his website that he writes about all this is I think it's Claude Blattman. I'm sure we can include the link. But he's an academic who says at the end of last year he was a skeptic and thought it was all a little bit of a waste of time. Full convert now and operates completely in the Claude command line interface for everything, and he has open sourced all his processes and methods and how he uses it to support his research and his emails and his administration and all those sorts of things. And it's a US, as I said, I think it's US, could be Canadian, it's certainly North American specific, and only so some of it's not necessarily going to apply to an Australian university context, but there are people out there like that, and I think that's a really great contribution to put all that out there. I'd say an Australian academic could look at people like that and decide which, and again, this goes back to that point I made earlier about it being the opportunity for individual innovation is so significant here. They can think about what of those things that that are published on Claude Blattman are of relevance to them and that they could make use of and that would support their work. I don't see... I don't know where the debate lands, though, and I think it's a debate being had across all parts of the community. It's like, well, what stuff should be written by a person? Because it's almost like we need an agreement that certain things are going to be written by a person. It's not okay to use an AI for it. I don't know, does a cover letter and a job application, when it's just written by an AI, it sounds like people that read job applications say that they all sound the same now, whereas you go back, 5 years ago, and there was an indication of effort that had been put in, perhaps by the quality of the cover letter. Good writing doesn't indicate anything now regarding the effort of the individual. It doesn't reveal a whole lot about the individual necessarily. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the answer to that is, and I know in academia it's an even more fraught question. At what point is it no longer you, the author? Could turn into a real mess, that one.
It really
probably
could.
Already is, actually. I honestly don't know.
It'll be interesting how the sector responds and what the future of higher ed looks like. There's so much value and there's so much beauty and knowledge and status and all the things to be protected. But it will be really interesting, and I think how people embrace it and respond is going to be the difference between surviving and not, I think, in this sector. If we come back to professional staff, because that's where we started this conversation, what's your take on, because obviously there needs to be an approval of the use of these types of tools within the professional staff workforce, regardless of what particular AI to approve or whatever. Are you seeing adoption at the executive level when you're speaking to universities that would suggest that there is an appetite to start filtering that down to staff, including professional staff, to enable that workforce?
I say mix. I think there's still a lot of people that haven't. Actually, it's probably not true. There's a small number of people that haven't used it at all. I actually don't have any evidence to back this up, but I'll say it anyway. So I bet there's thousands and thousands of people using the free versions of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and that are using I'm sure a lot of institutions have access to Copilot. But my observation would be that people want to use the best tools they can get. The tools are available on the internet for free. So there's going to be a shadow AI policy, which is use whatever, whenever, for whatever reason, and then there'll be the official AI policy. I don't think the official policy is catching up for a lot of institutions, and I think they're also seeing it as a technology deployment question, and I think that's misunderstanding. It is a technology, but the underlying issue for a university is not an IT issue. It's strategy and operations, and it's also the human that's going to be using it as well. So it's more like a culture and HR and strategy question rather than a technology deployment question, because you're looking to enable your staff. There needs to be, and it goes back to my comment earlier about the space to innovate and experiment. I'm not convinced that there are many universities that have created that cultural and operational environment where professional staff are going to feel confident and comfortable that their skills are sufficiently valued and they're considered sufficiently important in their, as far as their intellectual and professional contribution to the university is concerned, to be retained if they come up with some awesome way of being super efficient or super impactful using some of the AI tools that are available. I think that's going to hold back a lot of the experimentation and innovation on the professional side.
I think you're right. My take from the ground is probably more, I think sometimes in, especially small universities, people feel irreplaceable in that I do this and it's important, and there's a genuine sense of importance on the work and the value that they add, and that the whole thing would fall down if I'm not here to do this thing. And it makes me think, I'm not sure how much embracing AI would, like, they would still feel like they're valued and that that the thing would fall down if it wasn't, if I wasn't here, you know? Like, there's always a case for having human intervention. It's just an enablement tool. And I think about how we use AI at Research Strategies Australia. We're fast adopters, I think, of new AI, and it certainly enables all of us to do way more efficient work. But the point is, we're still growing, we're still expanding. There's a high level of trust here, I would say, to know that we're quite clear on how we as humans add value, and then how the AI can add its value, and together we're building this workforce that is actually really, really cool. It's kind of like you just want to show people, okay, look what we're actually doing. This is how we operate. It's so seamless and lean. You can do the same, but yeah, like it opens up what else is possible for professional staff. But I wonder what that would additionally look like. Like, I think we have ideas of, if we had all these resources, if we had all this time, this is the type of thing that we'd love to do. If you had a workforce that now had a bit of breathing room, I don't think you'd get 50. I think everyone's working at about 120, 150% right now just to keep the wheels on. If you actually gave people back a bit of time, it might be a normal workload. Wouldn't that be amazing? And and then you might have a bit of breathing space to actually innovate and think clearly and creatively about your work, and try those things that you would always have loved to do but never had the time or capacity or resources or backing to do it. So I think it would just look very different. What's your take?
I agree, and I think what you're describing is the positive scenario, which hopefully would unfold across the university sector, because we've got all these people that can now they've got the breathing space you just talked about. They've got the opportunity to improve change things, but they're operating in a world that is, or an environment that enables them to do perhaps arguably more of the stuff that they want to do to have an impact, because in most cases they want to help the institution, help the academics and do good work. But there's an opportunity potentially for a complete reconceptualization of what it is that that team does. It could be quite exciting. To me, the enabling people and giving them confidence that if they find a way to be twice as efficient and to do more stuff that's useful and interesting and helpful and all those good things, that it won't come at a personal cost, that it will be seen as a positive in the organisation. They'll be supported. It's partly what will they do, but it's also partly what do staff think the institutions will do in that situation. And that's probably, to your point, so as you were talking, I was thinking, wonder if it's also a smaller institution, there's a little bit more of an all hands on deck mentality. So there's fewer people doing more things across the fundamental aspects or the stuff that's sort of common across all institutions. There's smaller teams. And so perhaps there's a little bit more of a sense of, well, if I do less of that, there's always more of this thing over here I'll be doing, because there's no shortage of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think there's a piece of this also that a lot of the systems now and processes are pushing back to academics to say, you're responsible now for a lot of things that research services office would have had historically and now being pushed back to the academics. And so the academic workload is strained beyond comprehension. And so even just the part where, okay, you've got more capacity from a professional perspective, the whole point is being of service to academics so they can do what they need to do. In the case of a research office, it's helping them do their research. So you tap any academic on the shoulder and say, I'm here to support your research. How can I help? They'd be laughing at that. So I maybe naively think that I see the value and I see the people in those offices that work so hard and they have amazing ideas and can see equally as frustrated as academics at the system and what the whole reality of it looks like. But I think enabling them with tools like AI and creating space for them to be creative and have a difference to the university and the culture of a university as well.
I don't know that I agree that the sole purpose of professional staff is to I'm probably being reductive of what you said, but the sole purpose of professional staff is to support academics, and I think that's one part of what the professional staff are there to do. One of the things that universities aren't great at, in my opinion, is recognising the domain knowledge and the skills that professional staff are bringing and treating it as in its own domain as something that is of similar value or intellectual importance as the work that is being done by academics and others in the university. I'm not saying they're the same thing, but I'm saying that it is possible for professional staff to know more about particular areas of the stuff the university is trying to do than academics. But I don't think that is widely accepted across the institution. And I think that plays out where we see the inclusion of academic staff in a whole range of things in relation to, say, business development and partnership development, purely because you've got to have an academic involved. Well, just to finish my thought, there's a bunch of stuff that they could trust professional staff are probably going to be better at it than anyone else. in the academic community there. There's also lots of stuff where academic oversight is really important because the staff, the professional staff, might be building a thing that's going to have an impact on the academic staff or their ability to teach. And so the idea that the professional staff go off and work in splendid isolation and then unveil a thing is not what I'm saying. But there can be a real perception that the academic staff, what's happened to me before, where I've had academic staff telling me how to do a thing that I've been doing for 20 years, that they have not been doing for 20 years, and they're fundamentally wrong in what they're suggesting. They're way off base. It's just totally, it's not going to work, what they're suggesting. But the confidence with which they're telling me how to do a particular part of my job is something to behold. Now, some of that's going to be
gaslighting at its best, right?
Yeah, but I mean, and some of that's personality based and all those sorts of things. Totally get that, but there's an institutional tendency to that as well, where the professional staff can be seen as the people in the background who are just there to keep things running, the lights on, the place clean, the pay slips going out when they should go out. Well, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. They're sort of the background machinery, and so I think if we want universities to get better at some of the things that they've got professional staff who are really good at certain things, but essentially the university blocks them from being able to do the stuff. And I mean, partnerships would be an example of that, or gets in their way. And I think, yeah, it's a whole nother conversation.
Do you mean about like deal making? Yeah,
it's good.
I'm ready to go there to the combo if you've got time. It's just the business development part of things is interesting to me and interesting to both of us. We have a lot of things to say on this. I'm talking about making deals with partners, community, whatever that looks like outside of the university environment. Who are we partnering with? I tend to think that the deal makers should also have expertise in the area that they're doing. Now, I'm not saying that academics generally have this skill to do effective deal making in that way, and maybe the support of a BD professional would be very helpful at that moment in time. But I'm not necessarily convinced that just having a BD team go out and find opportunities and have these conversations. Like, as an industry person, I don't really want to talk to the BD folk. I know that they're trying to make a deal. They can facilitate the deal. I want to talk to the expert and know if they can actually help me solve my problem.
So where I think the BD person, the sort of hypothetical BD person perhaps would be strong at is the translation between the two. So the academic is operating in a particular environment, the business is operating in another environment, and they don't necessarily make sense to each other without someone helping to translate or smooth the flow of communication. So I'm not suggesting the BD person is going to define the project and explain what's possible, but they might help the academic identify the right. So they identify a partner that's interested in doing a whole lot of stuff with the university that's relevant to a particular academic, let's say. Get the right academic involved, set up the conversation, make sure that everyone, they're communicating in different ways to both parties. And then helping to drive the relationship forward. Because the academic's got a million other things to do as well. If they've got a high teaching load at that time, it could be best of intentions, but there's no follow-up emails sent, like all that stuff that a good BD person is good at. So the translation between the two, helping to develop a sensible scope of work, making sure that there's not going to be surprises on coming from one side or the other, that the project plan looks reasonable. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they should be able to help with. And quite frankly, they're probably going to be, in my view, the domain expert at. So let them do that, is what I'm suggesting. And so if a BD person has secured another, I'll make an example up, but secured a meeting with a large European multinational that's considering making an R&D investment in Australia, and the BD person's got them visiting the university, don't exclude the BD person from that meeting because they're a junior relative to the importance of let's say the CEO's flying out, all these senior staff. There needs to be an acceptance that the person that might take a central role in that conversation is actually a BD person from one of the faculties who's teed all of this up and is across all the detail. I just think in academia, there's a degree of credentialism, and it can be a real, as opposed to the non-academic world, where there's more of an interest in your experience, what you can do, how you can bring your experience to bear on the problems that we've got today, and how you can contribute to the group that's trying to solve the thing. So the fact that you've got 20 years or 30 years of experience is not relevant if you can't do the thing that needs to be done. No one's going to be that interested in your 30 years of experience if it's not specifically relevant to the task at hand. The credentials are only relevant in that context, if that makes sense. That's sort of, there's always grey. I mean, there's lots of big companies where credentialism is the order of the day, no doubt. But it's an important part of academia, is the citation, the publications, the recognition, the contribution of knowledge, building up a reputation over time. But a lot of that stuff's not relevant outside of that context. And I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that context. I'm just saying we need to recognise that there's different situations call for different types of expertise. And so there needs to be a degree of flexibility there. Tim and I talked about that earlier. But I think that can at times make professional staff feel unrecognised, undervalued, and that their expertise is being looked down upon if they're not the academic in the room making the comment. It's the professional staff that it's some places do have that. I think they do have that issue, that credentialism. There's a small amount of research that I've come across about that. If we go down the academic path, there's actually not much. It's quite interesting. There's something from the late 90s actually written by an academic from the University of Wollongong on that credentialism. It's quite interesting read. And then I came across a PhD dissertation of someone that had interviewed a whole lot of professional staff about their experiences and then turned that into a PhD, which was an interesting read. I think that was from Canada or something, but there's not a whole lot on it, but there's a little bit. And it certainly seems to have been a consistent experience over time for professional staff in lots of circumstances. And I've been a professional staff member in a university. I'm not suggesting that's not necessarily the dominant culture, but I could see where some of that can come from.
Yeah. There's certainly tensions there from my experience as well.
And that's on the AI thing. I just don't know how that plays out. I genuinely don't know. That's where having it not as an IT deployment thing, but as a human plus operations plus strategy, it'll be interesting. Taking that approach is probably going to be more fruitful and help to identify those issues, if there are any. There might not be. That's great. But if there are those issues that are holding back some of that innovation and that creativity on the professional side, and it could be the same on the academic side, but taking that approach will at least help to identify that hopefully earlier and deal with it.
Yeah. I think, a strategic approach to the deployment of AI is necessary, and it may be that the IT department needs to roll it out in an enterprise level way, and then it's about the enablement of that, with everything sort of coming together. And I think the clarity on the ambition and the goals is probably the best use of that, because you can imagine if everyone was handed basically their own mini workforce to get their work done, which is what it actually is. That could organically be going in many, many different directions, where I think there's a call for leadership to go, this is where, we want your focus to be. As in, here's the end goal. If we all operate toward that, then that's a cohesive, coordinated workforce, as opposed to, creating another Karen process, that's going to serve one person and not the cascading effects it has further down the road. All right, I think we've covered a fair bit, Phil.
We have.
Thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, Willo.